Welcome. Okay, I am going to share my screen. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Okay, and okay, can I get a confirmation that folks can see the HEC 2026 mid-session report on my screen?
We can see
Yes.
it, Sam.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And I want to do a little shout out for our green business sponsors who are uh, folks, the businesses that have demonstrated their commitment to sustainability in their business practices. And I also want to do a shout out for the team at Hoosier Environmental Council. It takes quite a bit to put these webinars together, and it's been very much of a team effort. So I very much appreciate everybody's involvement with that. I'm Sam Carpenter. I'm Executive Director with Hoosier Environmental Council. And I'm going to serve as a moderator and a host for today. Hoosier Environmental Council works toward a vision where all residents have abundant access to clean water, natural lands, pure air, and affordable clean energy. And that really drives our work every day. Today, you're going to hear from some of our team about the legislation that we're following, as well as ways for you to get involved in the issues and things that are most important to you. We'll cover topics from natural lands to data centers, concerns about rollbacks, environmental protections related to the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, more commonly known as IDEM. And we do have a Q&A feature. Can I get confirmation from some of my team members that we've got a Q&A feature enabled? I don't see it. But we do have the chat featured enabled. And okay, there
Hey,
is a Q&A there. So feel free to put questions in the Q&A, and then we'll be answering those throughout the session and typed, and then we'll have a few answers in the back at the end as well that we'll do live. The chat is not going to be monitored for questions, so please put those questions in the Q&A. Last, I'll just say that at the end, we're going to drop an evaluation in, and we'd appreciate your support in filling that out because we want to understand how we can create the most value for you with your time as a participant. So thank you for that. Okay, our first speaker today is Toby Days, our Sustainable Agriculture Director. So, Toby, I will pass it off to you here.
thank you, Sam. Yeah, I had two agriculture related bills that have both passed out of the House and are now referred to the Senate that I wanted to highlight for you today. The first is House Bill 1424, Farm and Homestead Food Sales. This was authored by Representative Hunter Smith, who himself is a small farmer. I've had a pleasure of visiting his farm. He has a little store set up in his barn where he sells direct to consumers, and he understands the barriers that small farms and producers have selling to local markets. And this bill is really based on the food freedom movement that has an approach of to support the right of individuals to produce and sell food directly to consumers without traditional state and local licensing and inspection requirements. And this really puts the responsibility of food safety in the place primarily on producers and buyers. And the goal of this bill is really to reduce regulatory burdens on small scale farms and homestead vendors that sell direct to consumers. And under this bill, state and local governments may not impose rules, regulations, certifications, inspections, or licensing requirements on small farms or homestead vendors beyond what is required by federal law. And although this bill does define small farms and homestead vendors as those who gross annual sales of less than $1.5 million per year, which is about 90% of all farms in Indiana. Uh, the Hoosier Environmental Council does believe that this is a positive bill that will help expand access to locally grown foods and support small agriculture producers. So we do support this bill. The next bill that I want to talk about is House Bill 1355, confined feeding operations. These are those high capacity livestock facilities. Um, some confined feeding operation applicants are frustrated that it's taking 6 months to a year to go through items of permitting process to get approval to construct the confined feeding operation. So this bill is intended to speed up that process. The bill would require IDEM to decide on a completed application within 90 days. If they don't complete that review process in 90 days, they would be required to refund the application fee, which I think is a hundred or $125. This bill also would would permit CFOs as a permitted use on land zoned for agriculture. This would prevent local ordinances from requiring public hearings. Not all, but some counties in Indiana do have ordinances that require public hearings if a CFO is proposed to be constructed in their county. Um, this gives this gives the public a forum to voice their concerns or approval. And this bill would take away the county's ability to develop an ordinance to require those public hearings. In addition, Indiana does have the confined feeding control laws that define structural design requirements for CFOs. And some CF owners have been required by IDEM engineers to install additional infrastructure or do additional testing to verify structural integrity of their design that go above and beyond the requirements that were written into the law. So some CFO owners were feeling singled out by IDEM and made to do other things that other CFO owners did not have to do. So this bill states that IDEM may not change designs of CFOs if it was designed by a professional engineer and it meets those design standards that were written into the confined feeding control law. So the Hoosier Environmental Council does have concerns with this bill. You know, if IDEM does not have adequate staff to complete reviews in 90 days, this is an issue that legislators can address through appropriate funding to IDEM to make sure that they have the funding to hire the staff to do the reviews. In addition, IDEM should work on developing a more consistent and unified review process. But it's also important to take into account at the same time that environmental conditions vary across Indiana. Soil types, groundwater levels, and other site-specific factors differ between northern and southern parts of the state. And for these reasons, I think it's important that IDEM engineers retain that discretion to require design changes when those unique environmental conditions justify them. And it's important that if there are those specific environmental conditions that commonly require additional safeguards, that those should be clearly written into the confined control law so applicants understand those requirements in advance. So for those reasons, the Hoosier Environmental Council is opposed to this bill. Sam?
Thank you, Toby. And I think another theme that Hoosier Environmental Council is interested in is giving opportunity for the local zoning and public comment in some of these expansion of these operations. So thank you for that, Toby. Let's see. I'm going to go on if we have um, David is ready to operate. And David, I'm happy to do your slides, or if you want to grab control of that, you can. But are you ready to share here?
Yeah, Sam, I think I am ready to share, although
Awesome.
I'm getting a screen thing that tells me that somebody still has control that I can't share yet.
Well, I've got your slide up, so I'm happy to
Okay,
do that for you.
great. Thank you. I appreciate that, Sam. So the first slide, and by the way, I'm David Van Gilder. I'm the Senior Policy and Legal Director. The first slide just kind of is a general overview of what's happened so far in the session. HEC started by tracking 88 bills out of the box back at the beginning of January. About 23 of those bills, there's a couple yet to pass on Monday, but about 23 of those bills are going to go through the first half and then are going to be in the opposite chamber the second half starting next week. There were 5 bills that HEC was following pretty closely that we would have liked to have seen passed, but didn't, which means that we will be hoping to find a place to insert positive, good language from those bills into bills that are moving through the second half of the session. Conversely, there are about 4 bills that did not advance that we are concerned may resurface in the second half. So overall, we've been pretty busy with things. I'm going to talk about 5 bills pretty quickly here. The first one is a bill that we've championed from the beginning. Senator Shelley Yoder, joined by her 2 Republican colleagues, Senators Leising and Glick, pushed this bill, which is a study of natural lands for public health. I think we all know intuitively that getting outside, getting on public lands, getting on parkland, getting in our backyards is good for us medically. And so we're asking the DNR to study that a little more closely. That's one of the pillars of that bill. Another one is to establish some consistent visitor fees for state fish and wildlife areas. Right now, there's no fee system at all. And it would be good to help bolster the coffers a little bit of the Department of Natural Resources to collect some fees from birders and walkers. And then the third part is to have DNR develop a plan to mitigate and recover from natural disasters that affect public land. There was a tornado that destroyed a horse campground in one of the state parks, and there really was no money. There was no plan to get that up and running again. The second bill that I want to talk about is one that we do not support. That's Senate Bill 172, having to do with administrative rules. And basically, this is an anti-government, anti-regulatory bill. Again, HEC does not support it. It passed the first chamber, and so it'll go over to the House. What it does is create an entirely new regulatory committee. It's called the Administrative Rules Oversight Committee that would have essential veto authority over new rules or regulations that might have a fiscal effect greater than $100,000 over a 2-year time period. The current threshold is 1 million. So right now, if a new rule comes into play that has some monetary cost to it, less than $1 million, if the legislator says it's fine, it's okay. But now, under this bill, if it passes, there would be a committee, brand new committee, that would look at bills and look at rules and regulations with a lower from a lower threshold and pass judgment on those. Again, the goal of it is to reduce regulation, which in some instances can be good, but in most instances is not. It means it's less protective of the environment. Third bill is the granddaddy of the bills that HEC really opposes this year. It's the IDEM, Indiana Department of Environmental Management agency bill. It's 165 pages long. It makes some needed corrective code fixes for outdated references and so forth, but it actually does some other very damaging things. It basically makes IDEM's enforcement of rules that might protect you and me and our kids and grandkids from environmental hazards. It makes it optional. There are at least 40 instances where the bill changes the word shall to the word may. And so whereas IDEM might have been required, shall, to do something, now they may do it. So that's a serious problem. There's another set of words added to IDEM's review of its own rules, suggesting that if they're burdensome, IDEM may not do it. So what does burdensome mean? We think it's burdensome to you and me and the public to have to deal with environmental hazards. So that's a problem in the bill. The bill also makes it optional for the IDEM commissioner to enforce environmental rules when there is already been found an imminent substantial endangerment to people. So it used to be that the IDEM commissioner had to file a lawsuit, had to take some legal action. And under this new statute, if it passes, he would be not required to save us from direct endangerment, but only maybe he could do it. So again, that's a very difficult problem. We have an action item that's been posted for about 10 days, and it's going to keep going. We've had almost 1,000 people already work on that. Anna's going to talk about how to participate in our actions at the end of this. The next bill that I want to talk about briefly is 1003, which is again a 300-page bill that was being written as the committees were meeting this session. Generally not the way to do government. HEC opposes this bill as well because it eliminates what's called the Natural Resources Commission, which is a body that guides and helps govern the Department of Natural Resources with respect to natural resources that we all own: fish, wildlife, nature preserves, waterways. We all own those collectively as citizens of Indiana. And the Natural Resources Commission is a body that allows us public access to comment on new rules and regulations. This bill would eliminate the Natural Resources Commission for, frankly, no good reason. So we oppose this bill, and HEC will be working in the second half of the session to defeat it. And the last bill I want to talk about is 1414, and this bill didn't actually pass the first half of the session, but I want to talk about it because it's a great bill. Not a great bill. It's not a good bill, but we're afraid that some of the language might end up in second half bill of a like kind. Basically, it tries to give user fee money to the Division of Forestry by charging people to go into state forests, and which could be laudable because the state forest agency doesn't really have enough money to do its job. But the other thing this bill does is without any scientific evidence, it says 10% of the forests have to be less than 20 years old, and 10% have to be over 100 years old. Well, right now, the state forests are managed so that about 24% of the forest land is over 100 years old. So this clearly is an invitation to the Division of Forestry to log more state forest to increase its revenue. And so we opposed it for that reason. It seems to be defeated on the first half of the session, but it may reappear. And so we're going to continue to monitor this and inform you all, our supporters, to keep vigilant on this bill. So those are the bills that I wanted to cover for you, and I'm happy to take any questions if Sam has one in particular.
Awesome. Thank you, David. And while I'm doing this, Rebecca, you can bring up your slides. I've removed my share, so you can bring yours. But David, I do have a question for you. This item bill seems kind of unprecedented. What's the background in terms of kind of totally overhauling an agency like this, the way this one appears to be doing?
It's a good question, Sam. Pretty much every other year, one agency or another has what they call their agency bill, and usually it's kind of a code cleanup. They do some minor shifting of things or they tweak some things. This year, the IDEM is doing that, and they consulted with about a handful of industry people to do so, and they started to do that by their own admission 5 or 6 months ago, or maybe even further in the summer, and they didn't consult with us. They didn't consult with anybody in the environmental or conservation community. And that's kind of a failure on IDEM's part to really get all the stakeholders. So it's not unusual for them to do an agency bill, but it is unusual for them to make so many substantive changes as they're trying to do here.
So, sorry, and this is really a Braun administration bill. This is where this language is coming from, and this push to really overhaul IDEM and remove a lot of the requirements related to environmental regulation. That's where that's coming from.
Right. And I'll just, on that note, real quickly, Sam, I mean, HEC responded to a request for public comment and urged our supporters to do so in the summertime. Out of the 1,400 plus pages of responses, 30, fewer than 30 were from industry saying this might be a little bit burdensome. All the other 1,400 were from our supporters, conservation supporters, citizens of the state that said, no, regulation is not burdensome. We want you to make it stronger. So this flies in the face of that strong public sentiment.
Yeah. Thank you, David. And while Rebecca's getting her screen up, her slides up, I'll just remind folks, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A.
All right, everyone. Good afternoon. Sam, can you see my screen okay? Perfect. My name is Rebecca Tukolsky. I am the Climate and Energy Senior Advisor here at Hoosier Environmental Council. And it is my very first session. So if you're new to this work, come find me in the hallway. I'll be happy to show you what I've learned so far and we can learn together. This year has really been a big year for utility bills. We've seen a number of bills that have been introduced to address things like affordability, to address data center planning, and a lot of those bills didn't even get a hearing. There's a lot of language that we would like to see come back in a future year, such as things like transparency related to data centers or plug-in solar units, which Sam's going to talk about here in a little bit. But I'm going to focus on a few bills that we were able to engage on early in the process. So, starting first with HB 1002, which is called Electric Utility Affordability. This bill is really targeted at making changes to the way that utilities seek profits from their ratepayers. Currently, within the framework of utilities, they're able to build something new, and then, like a gas plant or new transmission lines, and then pull all of that cost into the rate base. And then they get a certain fixed rate of return that's determined by the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission on whatever they've spent. So what that does currently today is it gives them the incentive to spend more because the more they spend, the more they earn. And so what this bill does is it creates some incentives to sort of change the way that utilities are actually earning returns on their investments. One of the things that it does is it creates two different performance incentive metrics. This is part of an approach called performance-based rate making. It's intended for utilities to, instead of focusing solely on how much can we build, so how much can we earn as a result of that, these kinds of performance incentive metrics would change the compensation structure so that if your utilities become more affordable, they actually earn a little bit more. If they get your power online faster after Winter Storm Fern, they would also get a little bit more profit as a result of improving their service to you. So we like this bill in theory. We like a couple of provisions of it. In particular, there's some language that we like the fact, first of all, that it's addressing affordability. That's a big concern for Hoosiers. And we like that we're very encouraged by the conversation that's happening around affordability and around the quality of service of utilities and the approach that they're taking to that. It does offer additionally some summer shut-off protections for lower income folks, which we think is encouraging, but we think those provisions could be stronger than the way that they're currently written in the bill. It also addresses the fact that if it's really hot, for example, in July, your bill today might go up from $200 to $400 just because of that heat wave. And for all customers, it will default everyone to what's called a levelized billing plan, and it will make it so that your utility your utility charge would be the same across a 12-month period based on what you had used in the previous 12 months, and then it will adjust. It will adjust in two ways. One is that it will adjust every 6 months or so, depending on what language ultimately gets into the bill, so that you'll either receive a refund or an additional charge based on what you used in reality in that 6 month period. And then year over year, it will kind of look backwards at those previous 12 months and say, okay, how many kilowatt hours did you use in an average month in 2025? Therefore, how much should we charge you for an average month in 2026? And we think that could help people budget better, but ultimately that folks need to be able to understand what they're being charged for and why. And we're grateful for the opt-out measure in that aspect. The last thing that this bill does is that it gives the governor emergency powers over utility planning and IURC orders. This one is a particularly concerning provision that was added by an amendment. This would allow the governor to supersede if, for example, the IURC, the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, has ordered a coal plant to shut down. But a data center is coming in, for example. I'm just giving an example here. This might not be what happens, but if the IURC has ordered a coal plant to shut down and then a data center comes in and would need that power, the governor could come in and say, we're going to declare an emergency and we're going to order that coal plant to remain online. So we're very concerned about that emergency language. We're seeing that happen today at the federal level, and we're concerned that it might happen in a bigger way at the state level if this language is authorized. So all in all, this bill, there are some good things about it. There are some additional protections for Hoosiers, and we're grateful for the conversation around affordability and around the way that our utilities work. But we are continuing to work with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. We worked with a number of lawmakers in the House side and continuing to work in the Senate to try to strengthen both the performance metrics to incentivize utilities in a stronger way to do what's right for the public, and then also to adapt or remove some of these provisions that we think either could be stronger or need to be removed. The next bill I'd like to talk about, unfortunately, has not made it through the House. This bill is related to battery recycling. So obviously, batteries are a huge part of the electronics industry today. We use them in everything, and unfortunately, they do contain chemicals, heavy metals, and other pollutants that can be toxic and can also be a fire hazard if they're not disposed of properly. And so other states have created what they call a battery stewardship program, and this bill would do the same thing. It would allow the Indiana Department of Environmental Management to create a battery recycling program, and then the producers of batteries would have to create a plan to participate in that program. So the idea of this entire bill is that it would make it easier for the average consumer to dispose of their batteries properly and in a safe way. This bill passed unanimously out of committee, and every single person testifying was in support of this bill, including ourselves. Unfortunately, it was referred to Ways and Means and didn't get a hearing in that committee. And so we're looking forward to revisiting this language in a future year or potentially through an amendment if an opportunity becomes possible. The next bill that I want to talk about here is the Surplus Interconnection Service bill. This is really exciting for us because it's a great opportunity for us to work on a common sense solution in the state of Indiana, anywhere across the country. Utilities will get approved through the MISO PJM or one of the other operators that manages the whole grid to bring new generation assets online. So if they have a new coal-fired power plant or gas plant or a new solar farm, they have to get approval to bring that asset onto the grid, and they get approval for a certain amount of megawatts. And so let's say you have a 500 megawatt approval and you're only using 200 megawatts on an average day. You would have 300 megawatts left of like a private highway for you to put additional energy onto the grid. And what's happening today is a lot of times that additional 300 megawatts is going empty. They're not using it. But we do need more power onto the grid. And so this bill, what it does is it gives that same utility like a second pass at that empty lane on the highway. It would give the utility the opportunity to put solar or batteries or another asset on that same interconnection and put additional power onto the grid in an area that's not being used today. This is really important for a couple of reasons. One is because the average wait time to get a new asset onto the grid today is about 40 months. So if we need new power and we have a new asset, we're still waiting to get onto the grid. And this would allow for utilities to get online faster. But the reason that we as Hoosier Environmental Council love this bill is because the types of energy that are most likely to benefit from this approach are batteries and solar because they're cheaper and because they're faster. And so we think this is a great opportunity for us to work in a bipartisan and common sense fashion to do something that makes sense to get greener energy, cleaner energy on the grid. And then, unfortunately, I do have the sad task of sharing information about a bad bill that we don't like and we've testified against. Similar to SB 277, which David talked about, SB 258 would also remove some existing authorities for the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. This one is specifically targeted at nuclear facility permitting. So currently, at present today, IDEM has the authority and responsibility to permit any kind of nuclear facility that might want to come into the state. This is coupled with the regulation at the federal level for the actual nuclear aspects of the plant. And this bill would remove that authority from IDEM. This is really targeted at the small modular reactors, those small nuclear facilities that are being developed through Rolls-Royce and other agencies that are intended to help bridge the gap of the energy need that we're facing in the coming years. It's supposed to help those facilities get online faster, but our concern with this bill is that even though there is some regulation over the nuclear aspect at the federal level, we still need oversight at the state level to be mindful of Hoosier waterways, land considerations, and the people that live here. And this removes all of that state level oversight. So that is what I have to share for the moment. And Sam, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. And on that nuclear bill, like SMRs are a new thing. There's not really even federal regulation specific to SMRs. And there's also a lack of there's a lack of any place to store the toxic waste from SMR. The so those are going to be that toxic waste is going to be stored on site and in communities. So I'm going to share a few more bills before we go over to Anna, who's going to kind of tell folks some ways to get involved. But the first thing I want to do is to set the stage a little bit around data centers and the need for transparency around new data center development. So for context, a data center can use electricity equal to a major Indiana city. Water usage often can equal to many Indiana towns. Data center operators and developers have often operate in secret, often working with non-disclosure agreements with local government officials. Many of the financial benefits of data centers are stripped away through through sales tax exemption, which is a state tax, and also property tax incentives sometimes are given at the local level. There's a change to Indiana state's property tax in that they no longer have a 30% minimum cap on depreciating the assets. So that means the assets of a data center, which are the technical assets, are typically depreciated on an accelerated scale of 3 to 5 years. That can deplete the value that would be earned income through property tax for the local level. So that's one of the concerns. Also, infrastructure created for data centers is unique to any other type of development, and it often requires new electricity development, water infrastructure to be built. In fact, as more data centers are turning to natural gas and methane, Additional pipeline infrastructure is also needed, which is an additional expense for ratepayers. Big tech firms like Meta and Amazon, OpenAI, Google, and others are in a race that's leading to an acceleration of the build out of data centers. And in this race, there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers. And we want to make sure that Indiana communities aren't going to be on the losing end of this race. Data centers can have significant impacts on communities, on affordability issues, on quality of life, on the environment. And for more of that information on that, we're going to drop a link to a webinar we recently did with some partners in the chat. So if you want more information about data centers, you can follow that link. Now, the first piece of legislation that I'm going to cover is around data center development. This is a bipartisan bill that was authored by Senator J.D. Ford and Senator Spencer Deary, and it creates a working group to estimate future energy demands from data centers. And this is important because, again, these are big users of resources. The legislation would also require data centers operators to submit a quarterly electric usage and be published on the IURC website. Before issuing local permits for construction, local officials could require an assessment of water impacts, of electricity impacts, as well as carbon emissions and land use in relation to agriculture. So this was really a bill that focused on adding some transparency to the operation and planning around data centers. Unfortunately, this bill did not make it through committee, so it is not going to advance, but we are encouraged that it has bipartisan support, and we know that this is an important bipartisan issue in communities. HB 1333 is another one that does relate to data centers. We're actively opposing this bill and asking for a change because it opens up less productive agricultural land, Class 4 and Class 8 through Class 8, to development without the requirement of gaining a variance or rezoning to commercial or industry. What that basically means is they don't need to change the land use purposes to build a new development on this type of land, including if it were a data center. So this would remove local control through zoning authority to all types of development, including those data centers, and mostly in rural communities. The bill contains some positive aspects as well that we do support. The bill initially had removed the sales tax exemption that includes electricity sales, and HEC estimates that a single 100 megawatt data center could earn up to $5 million a year in income for the state through that sales tax. So unfortunately, that was removed. Instead, a provision was put in place where communities could receive 1% of the value of the sales tax exemption. So instead of 5 million, 50,000 would go to the local community. A bill also would allow for battery storage systems to be included in energy production zones, which are areas where energy production already exists. In 2025, legislation was passed that allowed nuclear, gas, and coal to be built without zoning approval in these zones, but they specifically included solar and wind. They did not mention battery energy storage, and this is putting battery energy storage as part of that mix. Another thing I want to share and talk some about is just energy choice and affordability. Energy prices, our electricity bills are rising pretty dramatically, both because of rate increases. There's need for investment in additional infrastructure. There's been deferred maintenance, so kind of neglect of some of the maintenance of the infrastructure, but also extreme weather caused by climate change, more extended periods of hot days, keeping our air conditioners blasting, are also contributing to our higher electric bills. On top of that, now we have this unprecedented or load growth that we haven't seen in decades. It's largely fueled by artificial intelligence. So Indiana needs to meaningfully address our electricity bills, and we strongly support two bills that help provide Hoosiers some choice in their electricity. Um, One is around plug-in solar, and you can see on both of these bills in the House and the Senate, it had strong bipartisan authorship. This is a bill that has been really popular. Unfortunately, the bill did not advance in the committee. I'll circle back to that in a minute. But plug-in solar systems or balcony solar allows small, more affordable systems that provide clean power for your home to be connected to one of your electric outlets. It's taken off in Europe and was brought to the U.S. through Utah legislation in 2025. New UL certification safety regulations remove some of the convenience and add some costs related to the existing technology that require a special plug outlet as well as expert installation that will add to some of those costs. But we do believe that with further adaptation, according to a paper by a group called Bright Saver, which is a national organization promoting plug-in solar, the tech is going to continue to evolve and more cost savings will be realized. These are systems, even with the higher safety standards and controls in there, these are going to be more affordable than rooftop solar systems as well as, and on a much smaller scale, but also more portable. So, with strong bipartisan support for this legislation, we expect this issue is not going to die. It'll eventually be taken up through an amendment or through future legislation. I also want to touch on SB 196. I'm sorry, 196, which is community energy. So, Hoosier Environmental Council for the past 3 years has been part of Hoosiers for the Community Solar Coalition. Legislation was introduced this year that's really grown that because it's gained a Republican author and was broadened to include a number of different types of energy, capped at 20%, 20 megawatts on commercial rooftops, brownfields, and other developed sites, and capped at 5 megawatts on farm ground. Now, this doesn't specify the energy source, but as kind of Rebecca was alluding to earlier, solar and battery pairing are the things that had the most market opportunity. They're the quickest to market, and we think this would help enable those. So this legislation allows independent developers to build these projects and then sell the electricity through a subscription basis, which typically comes at a cost savings for subscribers. So while this legislation did not advance this year, we are encouraged with the progress achieved through the coalition and our partners. So with that, I am now going to pass things on to Anna. And Anna, would you like me to stop sharing and you share your own slides, or would you want me to keep these up?
You can go ahead and keep them up, Sam. I only have 2 slides, so I'll just tell you when to press next.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Starting now, you can press go one more for me. Oh no. Okay, let me share my own.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Perfect. Can you guys all see my screen here? Sam is
Yes.
We
oh,
can. It's not in a presenter mode, but okay.
oh,
Now, I think because you have two monitors, it's doing a funny thing, so you can choose not to put it in presenter mode if you want.
okay. All right. All right. So we'll just look at it this way. Hey everybody, my name is Anna White. I am the Advocacy and Action Manager for Hoosier Environmental Council. I've been with HEC for about a year. I go to a lot of our events, so hopefully I've had a chance to connect with some of you in person. And I'm really excited to do a very quick talk about our upcoming volunteer opportunity. So it's called Social Media Butterflies. But before I do that, I want to say There are two active actions right now for us here at Hoosier Environmental Council. One is SB 277, which we talked about, and one is HB 1333, which we also talked about. So my colleague Sarah Kautzman is going to put those in the chat, and you should be able to click on those and submit an action. If you already submitted an action on SB 277, because we've been, pushing that out for a couple weeks, know that now it's actually like sent towards House representatives because of the crossover. So go ahead and fill it out again and encourage your friends and family and everybody in your network to fill it out again because we have a different advocacy target this time. In HB 1333, you guys are the first ones to get to do this advocacy action. The next place you'll see it is in our Monday e-news. So I just want to make sure that, if you have a second, go ahead and fill those out. And we are really excited to share those with you. So on a related note, I want to talk about our Social Media Butterflies volunteer program. So part of my role when I joined Hoosier Environmental Council was to start rolling out a volunteer program so more people could get involved and use their skill set to help further our mission. And the first thing that we are kind of officially rolling out is this Social Media Butterflies program. It's really on the go. It's something that you can do, from your lunch break, from, the sidelines of your kid's soccer game. And that's like a really unique feature of it. And so if you haven't heard about it, I'm just kind of going to give a little bit of an introduction. So, our social media butterflies is a way to formalize our network and solidify our response to advocacy calls to action that we put out, to events that make people better advocates that we put on, and also sometimes to other things that don't neatly fall into one of those categories. But our main focus will be calls to action and also the occasional event. And so what we're asking people who are social media butterflies to do is to intentionally engage their networks in our calls to action and in our events and other things we ask them to share. So part of this is going on social media and sharing our, calls to action on social media with your networks. Some of this is sharing things offline. So bringing it up in conversation with people that you think might be interested but might not be aware and aren't likely to engage with your posts on social media. It might also mean reaching out to people that are more likely to respond via text or email and saying, hey, this is an action that Hoosier Environmental Council puts out. Here's why they're doing it. And it only takes, it takes less than 1 minute to fill it out and send a message to your legislators. And so you would be essentially sharing those things with your network. And a lot of you are probably thinking, okay, sure, but like I already do that. Why should I have to sign up for a volunteer program because I'm already on social media sharing your stuff? I already tell people about it, which I want to say, great, amazing. We are so glad that you're doing that. It helps carry our mission forward when anybody shares our work and what we're doing. But our goal is to be able to organize calls to action and other things we need to respond to quickly and flexibly, right? So we might reach out to you via email and say, hey, something just came up at the legislative session. We really need your help pushing this action as quickly as you can. So you might get a text or you might get an email just kind of saying, here's the links to all of our social media posts about this. If you could hit share on the social media sites you use, we'd really appreciate if you could work this into some conversations. And so one way to think about this is it is kind of making us more nimble responders. And it is also helping set an intention for you where you're saying, okay, I'm going to participate in this specific program and I'm going to, try to really intentionally work towards sharing these things. Our hope is that you're tapping into your networks to find people who might be really interested in what we're doing and maybe possibly pulling new people in. Because that's how we get the Indiana we want, right? Is we bring new people into the fold and we keep them engaged and we keep them active. We are also hoping to maybe find use social media butterflies as an avenue to pull volunteers in that are totally new to the organization. In the spring, I'm going to be working with some college and high school students that are new to HEC to get them started on this and get this to be a way for them to engage. By kind of feeling like, well, not only do I just know this organization and follow it on social media, but now I've made this, commitment to help them spread their messaging intentionally. And right now we're really more so focused on people that are already our supporters but might be interested in doing this program. But that rollout will come in the spring as well. So a couple of things really quick about Social Media Butterfly. Our time commitment is really low. We have it on our position description, I think, as like 2 hours or less every month, but I honestly anticipate it will not take you 2 hours to do this every month, even during the legislative session when things get a little bit busier. So know that we this is a pilot, right? We haven't done it before, so we're just kind of feeling it out and saying, I don't know, like 2 hours, but probably less. So, don't be intimidated by that number. Also know that we aren't going to spam you if you sign up to be a social media butterfly. Your volunteer support is something we very much appreciate, and the quality of your experience is very important to us. And there is, and Sarah Katzman will put this in the chat. If you are ready to train up and get involved on this, you can find a link in the chat with, it's a document that has all the steps, and each step is a link. So you'll find a video on YouTube to train asynchronously. You'll find the sign up form. You'll find my contact information there. You will find everything. So you can always reach out to me to ask questions. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. And this is a great opportunity. And I want people to know too that your involvement does have an impact. Um, you know, the redistricting that did not happen in Indiana is because of a huge community push in the state that many organizations were involved with and many voices were involved with. So I want to encourage people to continue to get involved and stay involved. This uh, social media is a great way that you can support the causes that are important to you. The other thing I just want to highlight is we discussed a few bills today. We actually have quite a few bills on our Bill Watch page, so I just dropped a link in the chat for that as well. There seems to be some questions popping up in the Q&A now, so let me take a look at some of those. Oh, there's the social media butterfly. Oh, Sarah's putting those things in there. Um, you can put those. Somebody asked a question in the chat about the links. If the link is not active for you, not working, I just suggest copying the link and pasting it into your browser. The other thing that I'll just say is somebody asked about, data centers and are things continuing to open up? Is there a push to open up and remove regulations that protect communities or open their voices or enable their voices to be heard and considered? And it's a real mix, honestly. A lot of, Citizens Action Coalition has estimated that 13 data center projects in Indiana have been stopped because of community voices. And Microsoft came out recently with a statement about the way they're going to work with communities and support communities. And this is a response to the pushback that we're seeing. In addition, we're seeing a lot of this is something that's happening nationwide, is that there's pushback against these data center operations because they use so much resources. And if for something unforeseen happens and the data center is not operational, that those resources that were developed specifically for that project aren't going to work for something else as well. So yes, there are some things that people are hearing about this and responding, but we need to keep those voices being heard, and that's one of the things that we're advocating for. Let's see. There's somebody, sorry that you're having trouble with the chat, so hopefully you can get some of those through the Q&A as well. Um, That I think we've answered most of the questions in here. Again, I want to thank everybody for your participation, being involved, in following along. The legislative session, there is a lot of technical, so it takes a lot of technical information in following these bills. We work very hard leading up to and during the legislative session to try to represent you and your values and the things that are important to you. If we could put the evaluation in the chat, we'd love to get your feedback. Um, and a follow-up email will go out as well for you to tell us, how we're doing and how we can do better. Um, so I don't see that going in there yet, but if it doesn't go in now, it will certainly come to you via email afterwards. So with that, I think I'm gonna close things up.
Hey, Sam.
Yeah.
Oh, there's one question that came in. Will we do an overcap after the session's over, similar to this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. Like a recap of the session, what happened. We did that kind of more along the lines of uh, a conversation between some of the policy folks. So we might try to do something like that again as well. Okay, now I see that the evaluation, it looks like it's dropped into the chat. So we would appreciate if everybody could fill that out and give us your feedback. And thank you again, and thank you for your participation today. And we will leave it at that. Always feel free to reach out with your questions and comments. Thank you.